you started up League for the Ethical Action on Drugs.
That's right. I met a woman, her name is Jane. I kind of forget her last name now, but she kind of started this little group called Lead, and she had a meeting, and only me and my friend were the only guys who showed up. I saw a poster for it at the SFU, like a university in Burnaby, which I attended. And I saw for this having a meeting for Lead, and so me and my friend went. We were the only people there. She rented out this hall, and like no one else came. And so, so we decided we'd start a group at SFU ourselves. We took her name, and that was my friend Greg. He's since written a book called Crystal Children about the methamphetamine and crystal culture, which is probably the only thing I've ever seen written about that sort of that aspect of the drug culture from that perspective. But we got people on campus together, and we started doing events and rallies. And we had Chris Bennett come down there. I think was the oldest activist to me. He seemed like this great, wise old activist, been around for a long time, and had the Patriotic Canadians for Hemp and selling them indica bars. And he came onto our campus a few times and talked about the esoteric and historical information about cannabis. And then there was a rally. What was his name? The guy that helped put on that rally. Well, we had Chris Lang. That was the one.
93.
And Leroy Campbell was doing the Hemp Fest Times newsletter, and a lot of the sort of early activists were around doing different things, and I helped out here and there and helped put on the rally and helped with the Hemp Fest Times and Leroy's group, and sort of got involved with this really kind of fledgling movement that had just been starting, I guess, for the last few years in Vancouver, and a lot of us
and I guess
came
Ian
together.
Hunter was around.
Ian Hunter was around as well. Him and I got a student business loan of about $2,000, and him and I started well, I guess it's still around, but we didn't really make any money at it. We started something called Total Hemp Corporation, a legal corporation. We filed all our paperwork, and we started selling kind of a Mama Indica kind of bar takeoff, although we weren't doing a good a job as they were. Didn't really go very far. We did a few other things like that and helped put on rallies and pub crawl, little things here and there.
And that was kind of the precursor to Hemp BC before Mark got here and showed us what the money-making side of hemp.
Yeah, I remember I remember reading about Mark in High Times and seeing him in the papers occasionally, little things he was doing in London and stuff like that. Came across to the West Coast, but first time I met him was at a pub crawl that Ian Hunter had organized, and it worked out all right. But it basically lost a fair bit of money. He got a few local businesses in the local area to put on parties, and you could buy a pass and go to all of them. And I was working the thing, and some guy came up and said, "Oh, can I help?" And people were always offering to help and volunteer. Normally they weren't much help, and so I was like, "Oh no, who are you?" He's, "Oh, I'm Mark. I come from London, Ontario." And I was like, "Oh yeah, the Chris Clay, you heard of him out there?" He's like, "Oh, I've helped Chris do stuff." And I sort of brushed him off kind of thing, because people were always volunteering, and most of them weren't in very much help or whatever. So, and then I went to South Africa for 10 weeks shortly after that, and when I came back, Mark had opened up Hemp BC with Ian Hunter helping him, and the Vancouver scene started to change quite a bit when Mark came here and started doing his thing.
Yeah, he certainly did. What do you recall from those early days as like standout moments, choice little bits of highlights of the early days, basically?
Well, I mean, things were different back then, partly because we were all a lot more new at what was happening, and so now I sort of feel like I've been through it all. If we got raided again, I'd be like, oh, well, what the heck, we're going through it again, we know what that's like, we know what to do, so... But, I mean, once Mark opened Hemp BC, I worked behind the counter for a little while, but I'm not really made for, like, getting up early in the morning and working retail all day and stuff, so that didn't last too long. But he was also doing a newsletter, which was called Marijuana and Hemp, and it was like, a 4 to 8 page thing. He'd done a few issues of it, and but he was finding himself too busy to do that, and he'd been using my articles in there already. I'd written an article about the history of cannabis in Canada, and I'd written some stuff about my trip to South Africa and the pot I'd smoked there, and so I just started working on it, and he hired me to help do that, and within one issue we changed it to Cannabis Canada, and myself and a few other early people in the magazine, none of whom are really around working at it anymore, but started churning out. It was supposed to be a quarterly magazine, but it was really more like kind of 3.5 times a year when we managed to hit the deadline, and like we get our deadlines pretty good these days. But
and it was really the first magazine in North America, if not the world, that had a seed catalog in it. Is that right? That's right.
I took a few issues for that. We used to run the Hemp BC mail order catalog. When Mark first opened Hemp BC, he wasn't selling seeds. It took him about 6-7 months. He went to the Cannabis Cup, and he was inspired by Ben Dronkers giving a speech about the good and the money he'd raised and how many people he'd helped grow pot, and how he'd sold more seeds and to grow more pot than the DEA had seized that year. So, and Mark was inspired by that, so he ordered a few and brought them back. And I think Mark was kind of surprised at the way the seed business took off. He just had a few little varieties in the back of the store and everything, and it became quickly to overshadow the whole store business, where he was sending people over there to smuggle seeds back on a regular basis, and local breeders would bring in big jars of seeds they'd got. And certainly the quality control of some of the early stuff was a lot more, informal than it was now. But I know a lot of good pot was grown out of those early seeds too. And it was after one of the raids, when we were after the first raid and we were desperate for money, the magazine had been late, and I remember Mark saying, take out that Hemp BC catalog, we're putting in a seed catalog in there instead. And there was some controversy among the staff as to whether that was a good idea or not, or whether that would cause problems, but never caused any problems for us. And I think it's helped, and ultimately as things progressed and more raids happened, Mark changed the whole business into mail order, and that's really, the magazine and the mail order business have sort of grown symbiotically together, I think, where they help support each other.
Now, the seed catalog, correct me if I'm wrong, but it came in at around 96 after the first raid.
Yeah, the first issue of Cannabis Canada was April 1995, and then we got raided in January of 96, about a month after Mark had been on CNN with the big thing on the media deluge came in and talked. Oh, I don't know if it wasn't CNN, sorry, it was Wall Street Journal was the first big one. The next raid was caused by the CNN appearance. It was the Wall Street Journal saying the police were winking at Mark. That brought in the raid in January. And then, it was the issue after that. The issue was delayed. We were going to print it all on hemp paper. Our first few issues were all on hemp paper, which cost a fortune and was a huge hassle and a big expense. And that one we had on the cover on hemp paper. We'd taken a photograph, and Dave, our art director, had to photo manipulate the on hemp paper part out of the cover. It was quite a bit of work, and then we put the seed catalog in there, and so it was really kind of a bold move to, after being rated for selling seeds, to actually push the seed business more by pushing it into the magazine. But it worked out well.
Only now has High Times, this year, started to print seed catalogs in their magazine.
That's right.
I think it's partly because of Cannabis Culture and their kind of consumer awareness campaign regarding the fake buds. And the High Times has had to move away from the unethical advertisement and more towards the ethical advertisement.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because they still run as many fake buds ads as they ever have. So I don't know if that's the situation. But I think that what Cannabis Culture has done for High Times, and really for the movement with Mark and the magazine together, is that we've opened it up for them and for other people following our footsteps. Before Mark came, the magazine still is illegal in Canada, and High Times is still banned in Canada, as you well know, under Section 462.2. These laws are still in place, but Mark really pioneered that by selling High Times in his store in London, Ontario, and then selling them here and opening it up and getting, and then High Times followed through by then coming into the Canadian market in a big way. And I think that what we've done is we've made the seed catalog, High Times didn't want to run seeds, they thought they'd get busted, and we took the initiative and ran the catalog for many years, and we sell a lot of copies in the States, and they're going, well, they're not getting busted, so maybe we should do that too. So I think what we've done is, just like nobody was selling seeds in Canada before Mark started doing it, and now there's tons of seed businesses all over the place, and that's a good thing. I mean, even though it's more competition, is ultimately that's what we want, an open marketplace, and there's room for lots of magazines and lots of seed businesses out there, I think. So, but I don't think High Times is going to start doing the seed ads and not the fake pot ads. I think they're going to run both, but they still run as many fake pot ads as they ever have, from what I see, anyways. When I see a copy of High Times.
Yeah, I see slightly more interest in the Cannabis Culture ethics department than the High Times ethics department when it comes to advertising. I also really like how we've kind of been blazing a trail on the quality control of cannabis itself with the radioactive tobacco ad. That's
coming out on our next. The radioactive tobacco article. Yeah, that was good. And as we know,
the players didn't like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we've tried to be more bold and more aggressive in our stance, and that's what I think the marijuana movement has needed. Is that sort of, a lot of people who smoke pot are passive and everything, and it's not aggressive. Doesn't mean violence, but it means being, and that's something Mark's brought into the magazine's perspective is when we're pushing constantly, trying to push the envelope both in information and attitude and what we do, trying to grow and expand, and just trying to keep on moving forward, always moving forward, and not ever settling for these halfway measures or we got we can do this or that. Let's take some risks and really make it happen. And sometimes you get the hammer and you get raided, but you come back and you can always, and that's what it's all about. So
yeah, I think the even better word is assertive. We're not stepping on anyone else's spirit, but we're not letting anyone step on ours.
Yes, definitely.
And
definitely.
We're not being snotty about it. We're not being snooty about it. We're just telling them the truth like it is.